Good morning. This is David Taylor Klaus, and this is episode 19 of Mindset Mondays with DTK. Love it when I have the camera on before I think I do. So if you'll take a moment and click share, it's an opportunity to share this broadcast and the entire Mindset Mondays playground with folks in your audience, folks in your network, folks that you think either have or would like to have a growth mindset. So that's what this is all about. This is a year-long discussion, giving folks with a growth mindset or those who wish to have one the opportunity to play with new ideas, new concepts, new mindsets. And that's how we grow. Right? So today's quote, let's play. Today's quote is, life never changes until you take a step in a different direction. I mean, it's fairly simple. Last time we were playing with the idea of intentionality. We were playing with the idea of looking beyond the imperfections and moving toward action. Right? So looking beyond the imperfections and moving toward action, yes, that's one thing. And you've got to be intentional. You have to actually take that action. And it's the chance to take that first step. I've talked a lot about done beats perfect. Instead of faffing about on the sidelines trying to get everything just perfect before you start, got to get it done, got to get it to that good enough move on place. And got to be intentional about the action you choose. Life never changes until you take that step in a different direction. Elaine and I have talked a lot about the idea of bridging the gaps, right? That there's a gap between when you get triggered and whether that's the saboteurs start screaming or you get angry or frustrated. The gap between the time you get triggered and the time you notice you're triggered. And in a perfect world, that gap is this big. That gap is notice that you're triggered right away. Doesn't always work that way. That's where all this work around mindfulness and self-awareness, or Marcia Reynolds talks about reflective intelligence, that ability to look internally and notice what you're noticing and think about what you're thinking about, that metacognition playground. So to close that gap between when you're triggered and when you notice is that reflective intelligence, that self-awareness. Well, the next gap is between when you notice that you're triggered and when you choose something different, when you take that step in a different direction, when you can attach intentionality. Now, it's not to say that even when we close that gap between when you're triggered and when you notice, that we quite often still choose the same path. Yeah, I'm triggered, I don't care. So I joke about sometimes there are mistakes that I make that I love so much, I just keep making them. Well, this is that piece of, wow, I've noticed that I'm triggered. I noticed that I'm not acting with that most modern part of our brain, that prefrontal cortex. I'm operating out of that fight and flight center, that primitive brain. Noticing that and taking the pause to choose something different. I've noticed that trying to change my life, I'm trying to change behaviors. So I've noticed that I'm in the same pattern that I've been in before. Well, now that I've noticed, what do I choose? Right? Life is not going to change until you choose to take a step in a different direction, until you choose something different. So what is it you're going to choose? What's the choice? What is that different direction? What are you being called to move into? Right? So what is it for you? What are the patterns that you're seeing where you operate unconsciously? And what are the choices that you want to make different? So you've noticed that you're triggered or you're operating in an unconscious way, right? Reaching into the refrigerator unconsciously and grabbing something that's not the best thing for you to eat, that's not in concert with your values around health or body. Or, my Vistage chair of the last 15 years, Larry Hart, just retired this past, or is retiring this week. And we just celebrated his retirement this past weekend. And one of the things he talks about is now what he's decided that he wants to do is live to 100. All right, so I've just made his goal public. Sorry, Larry. So Larry's goal is now to live to 100. Well, what about all those unconscious behaviors that we have where we hit snooze on the alarm instead of getting up to work out, or grab that second glass of wine or third glass of wine or fourth, or eat something off the menu that's not in the best interest of our long-term health? Well, those are all unconscious behaviors. Well, if you're going to live to 100, you got to change those micro behaviors all the way along the way. And this is not just about Larry, but, or amen to 100, right? Yeah, that's why I feel like I'm living in my back 50. I've passed 50. I'm in my second half, right? So in order to do that, the snooze button doesn't work anymore. I've got to choose something different, got to take a step in a different direction. And whether it's moving more towards impeccability, love that, LA. And so what are the changes in behavior that happen at that notice point, right? Trigger point, all familiar with that, right? And at this trigger point, at the notice point, what is the different choice that has to be made, right? You attach what's the goal and what are the different behaviors that have to happen at this notice point that will allow you to move closer and closer to that desired future state. There's the opportunity. With a clear and resonant picture of your desired future state, what you want your world to look like when you've created that change, you have a frame through which you can picture what you want choosing different to look like, right? You have to know what you're choosing different to get to. Otherwise, you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. I've got a clear goal, a clear desired future state. Here are the behaviors that have to be different. Do I go unconscious or do I choose something different? Right? Life never changes until you take a step in a different direction. Yes, Chad, absolutely. When you start with that visualization of healthy aging, it changes the way you make decisions. Well, it has the opportunity to change the way you make decisions every day, every hour, every minute, right? When you hold that visualization in your head, you have the chance to choose different at that notice point. Lots of you heard this, that my favorite quote from Stephen Covey, rather than start with the end in mind, there's another quote that's sort of the fundamental underpinning of all of his work, how different our lives are when we really know what is deeply important to us. And keeping that picture in mind, we manage ourselves to be and to do what really matters most. And that's the piece. That's how you shape that behavior change, the different choices at the notice point, right? Holding that picture in mind of what matters most and what that desired future state is, the lenses to hold your values and that desired future state. Then we get to look through those lenses at the notice point and choose something that is a different direction, one that moves us towards that desired future state. It can change our relationships, it can change our work, it can change our level of fulfillment. I think that's the challenge, is work on both gaps simultaneously. How do you close both gaps? Right? Using this mindfulness to be more aware of when we're in a triggered state, when we've gone into that reptilian brain and out of that prefrontal cortex, when we are operating from that basal place, right? So closing that gap through mindfulness, and then standing at that luscious, that juicy moment of choice, that notice point, choosing something different. So what will you choose, right? What will you change now? What is your step in a different direction, right? For those of us, Northern Hemisphere, this is Monday morning. And actually in New Zealand right now, it's Tuesday morning. So, so we have the opportunity to start the week taking a step in a different direction. Life never changes till you take a step in a different direction. What's the different direction? What's the step you'll take? How will you choose differently? We're at a notice point. Every one of us has a desired future state that we're trying to create. And whether that's better relationships, whether that's better use of our energy. Oh, LA, that's perfect. Operating from a reactive stage of life and being as positive. Well, thank you. And as positive as you can be, the idea that you get to choose the energy that you hold. That's a choice at this beautiful, juicy point of noticing, getting to choose something different. Wow. So this week, you have the opportunity to make different choices, to make good choices, right? One of the things we joke about in this house about parenting is always make good choices. So decide what a good choice is for you. Decide what a different direction is for you. Define your desired future state so that you get to make good choices here at that delicious moment of choice. And that's what Mindset Mondays is all about. Shifting your awareness so you can make different decisions so you can elevate the results that you get. It's your call. It's your choice. And until next week, what mindset will you choose?